We're actually going to get started now. So firstly, welcome everybody to today's Academy Live session. Hopefully you've all joined the right online class today. This is all around workflow essentials for automating your business processes. So I know we've got a lot of people who are first timers here for Academy Live. I hope you've all managed to read the joining instructions in the email that came out, and I all had a link to a video which gave a bit of an overview of the format of today's session and the tool that we're going to be using in the class, Strigo. So just a quick introduction. My name's Joel Eaton. I'm here as the head of learning here at Hornbill. And to support today's class, we've got Albina and Ricky, my colleagues here at Hornbill, who are going to be on hand to help you as you work through some of the activities that you're going to get given in today's class. Because what today's session is not, thankfully, you'll be pleased to hear, it's not 2 hours of me talking. It's some of me talking, I'm afraid, but there's going to be a lot of you doing. And that's what we really want to give you the experience of in these sessions, is some hands-on practical experience of using Hornbill outside of your day-to-day work. So just a bit of an overview. What are we actually doing here today? So a bit of housekeeping before we start. You'll note that your microphones are all turned off, you're all muted. That's really just to save issues of background noise and what have you. There are times, especially when you're doing the lab sessions, where if you need some help, we may initiate a one-to-one little session with you to walk you through anything. You can unmute yourself. There's a little microphone icon in the right-hand side where you'll be able to do that and have a chat with either Albina or Ricky. We've also turned all your videos off just to save bandwidth. But as you can tell, we encourage you to use the chat. So if you've got questions or comments or observations you want to make during the session at any time, feel free to use the chat away between yourselves, ask questions. We'll do our best to answer as we go. Probably the most important icon for today is the hand icon you can see in the left-hand side. And in the activities, you can use that to ask for help or ask for lab assistance, and one of us will come and do our best to help you out. You'll notice the icon here I've put is of a monitor. If you're doing the session today on a laptop screen, you may find it hard doing some of the activities, because the reason being is that you will have the instructions on one side of the screen and instance of Hornbill to work in on the other. So if you use Hornbill a lot on a laptop anyway, it can be a bit fiddly to navigate and move around. When you do that with a separate window of instructions, it makes it even more of a challenge. So if you do have a big monitor that you can connect to, or a separate screen, please plug that in and use that for the session. You can put the activities on full screen as well. Make use of all the width of your screen. My other tip for today, especially as many of you are here for the first time, is not necessarily pay attention to me, but pay attention to the instructions that we give you for the activities. Using Hornbill can be challenging enough, especially when you're new to certain areas of it, but we've given you very precise instructions and guidance. And if you jump over a few steps because you think, oh, I kind of know this thing, you may come undone a bit further down the line. So please pay attention to the instructions that we give you in the activity sessions. Okay, so in the wider context of what we are doing here today, so this is really we've called it Workflow Essentials. This session, it's an introductory class into what workflows are, how they fit within the Hornbill platform, and to get you going and to give you more confidence in using and editing workflows in Hornbill. We're going to explore the Workflow Designer interface, the different nodes, and the main components of the Workflow Designer tool. And Workflow Designer is really key to actually working with workflows. We're not just going to look around stuff. You are going to create some workflow elements yourself. You're going to create a basic workflow to handle simple ITSM requests around incidents. And we're going to get you to add certain things to learn the basics and the key elements of workflows in Hornbill. The main aim of this is to get you up to speed on being confident with the workflow designer, because over the next few Academy Live sessions and some of the courses we're going to be releasing, we're going to be really focusing on automation and how to really scale your automated tasks and processes using Hornbill, and not just the workflow designer tool, other aspects of Hornbill as well. So this session is perfect for you today if you have never even used the Hornbill workflow designer tool, or even if you have and you don't quite feel too comfortable in it, or even if you have used it a bit and you just want to kind of get some confirmation of some of the basics to make sure you're on the right track. So what do we mean by automation in Hornbill? The workflow designer is one piece of the puzzle in Hornbill, but automation is a real multi-layered concept that comes across in different aspects of IT service management and areas around IT, outside of IT as well. And we're here today to help get you prepared for better automation in Hornbill. So what we mean by automation is the use of technology to perform tasks without unnecessary human intervention. So by automating those things where we don't need to have human intervention, and by building out those processes where we can make better use of our agents' time to actually do the things that matter. Now, when we speak to our customers and when we speak to, IT service managers in Hornbill, there's two areas that they're really trying to develop in terms of their service desk activities. And the two big themes that stand out are really driving efficiencies in their processes, as well as improving the experiences of not only the customers, but the agents on the service desks as well. And by improving those experiences, they're going to get better feedback from customers. Their agents are going to have kind of more enjoyable times at work. There's going to be less turnover as well. By driving these and focusing on automation, we're going to see better consistency across the way things work, the operations of a service desk. And when you want to scale things as well, when things are automated, that allows you to improve the scalability of your business processes at the same time. When we assess our customers and we work with customers, we kind of view you and we try to get you to see where you are in terms of this kind of maturity model around where are you in terms of automation with Hornbill. And we can see at the left-hand side of this model, number one, if you're at this side of the model, you're going to have kind of really undefined processes. You're not really going to be 100% sure about what your practices are. They're not going to be well defined. You may have a go at trying to do them, but actually this is often where we work with customers who are new to Hornbill. They could be at that stage. Working with stakeholders, building out what those processes are and actually writing them down is the next stage of that maturity. That stage 2, we call it. And paper processes. Actually turning those paper processes into digitized processes is what we call guided processes. And they're not only written down, they're not defined, they've been signed off by stakeholders. They've been actually internally agreed and signed off, ready to go. And when they're digitized, now we can actually start looking at, right, where can we actually start adding some automations within that? Now, many processes are never fully automated, although we do see a lot of customers make use of processes that are kind of end-to-end automated. And that can be great for managing things like software updates, identifying issues around hardware faults that then can be rectified by integrating with third-party systems. So then we can start looking at, right, where can we start part automating and then start part still having human processes within those. And then finally at that number 5 stage, we see this end-to-end service automation, this kind of fully mature, fully fledged automated processes, which are really crucial in certain areas of IT operations. What we're looking at here today is this stage, number 3, kind of in the middle. We're looking at really digitizing our processes, making them guided, making them consistent, and looking at actually where can we start automating some of these things to start improving the activities of our service desk. So workflows in Hornbill actually can mean many things to many people. We don't have a great definition of what we say workflows are, but we're going to cover that today. So I want you to answer in the chat, what is a workflow in Hornbill to you? What does that mean to you? And for those of you that have been with Hornbill for a while, it's worth noting that what we are calling a Hornbill workflow was up until not too long ago called a business process. But we've actually changed the naming of it to simplify it a bit, to make it consistent across the product. So we've got a few definitions here. Great. Generation of tasks, assignment, or processes based on user input. Yeah. Self-service and consistency of support response. Yeah, great answer. Process created for work to complete. Nice and simple, Kenzie. I like it. Thomas says a defined business process that is captured in the system and has a series of logically sequenced steps. Yeah, I like that. Logic, sequence. Some great answers here. Anyone for any more? Functionality to make things work smoothly from the back end. Yes. All about reaching the end goal, Mosh. I like it. So things that need to happen, could be anything, to reach that end objective. We should be goal orientated, not technology driven, just for the sake of it. So even just from asking this question, we can see that all of these answers are perfectly valid and correct. A workflow in Hornbill, it's simply a series of steps designed to complete a task or a process. Here we can see a kind of a preview of what the workflow designer looks like in Hornbill. It's a series of sequential things that happen in an order towards completion. It's that simple. Okay, my next question for you. Where do workflows originate? From an input, Gavin says, yeah, potentially. Yeah. Business process driven by business needs, customer expectations. Yeah. Login of a call sometimes. Yeah. We do have workflow automations that can happen without being logged by an end user. They could be triggered by something else, for example. But you're right, commonly in service management, they are logged by a call. I think where we're going with this is that actually workflows originate in Hornbill. I think a couple of you alluded to this. From outside of Hornbill, they originate from your organization's documented and signed off processes. And this could be in a form of what we've got here, a swim lane diagram. They could be a Visio workflow diagram. They could even be in a spreadsheet. It doesn't matter where the source is, but they need to come from outside of Hornbill. They need to be fully documented, agreed, detailed, and signed off for the various stakeholders and excuse me, people involved within the processes. Here's a great example. Excuse me, of where workflows originate. They're not just the diagram, they're not just the flow, they need to be documented. They're part of your service strategy. They're integral to your SLAs and your agreements with other stakeholders across the business. So there's no point starting to design and build a workflow, a business process in Hornbill until you've got that full agreement, that full sign-off, that full buy-in from the business before you come here. And unfortunately, we do see that quite a lot when we work with customers. They'll start building something out, they'll think it's done, and actually because they've spent so much time and they've set it up, they'll then go back to the business and then have to completely redo it from scratch, which is really hard when things are already in flight, requests are already coming in, things are already happening. So it's almost as if when we create a workflow in Hornbill, you should be painting by numbers. You should be following the details that you've already built out in your fully documented and signed off processes. Okay. So I want to take a little step outside of the planning that we were just looking at and think about how do workflows fit in to Hornbill as a product, the Hornbill platform itself. So a good way to think about that is that through this diagram here, we can see that Hornbill is not just one thing. Hornbill is essentially a web portal that we go to. We manage all of our service desks there. People come and interact with it through either the employee portal or another view of it. But what's going on under the hood is that Hornbill is a platform. The bare bones of it is kind of like an engine room. the platform. And on top of that are the Hornbill applications. And the applications are basically a layer on top of the platform that speak into the platform, they do things in the platform, and they speak to each other via the platform. So within the context of the Service Manager application, which is, the bread and butter of most of our customers' uses of Hornbill, workflows exist inside the platform itself. You can think of them as those two cogs. Workflows are the engine room of Hornbill. Now, one of the things that sets Hornbill aside from our competitors and other ITSM products is that the level of complexity and the level of control you have within your service desk operations available through workflows is vast. And actually, most of your service desk operations, and pretty much all of them, are going to be tied to the workflows. So by learning and getting to grips with the workflow designer, having someone internally who could be your subject matter expert in workflows and updating them and managing them is going to be key to the success of you iterating and improving your business processes through Hornbill. So not only does the Service Manager utilize workflows through the platform, we're going to be really focusing on workflows through Service Manager uses today, because that's really where we see them getting used a lot. But in a Service Manager context, workflows underpin the entire life cycle of a request. So here we can see a request view from the agent's view. And actually the workflows determine what the agent sees, the stages of the request, what activities happen and when in a request. They underpin and define the entire request lifecycle. And we're going to have a look a little bit about how items of workflows surface on the request view shortly. One concept that's really important to understand, and a lot of you may be aware of this, but it's still worth covering, is how workflows actually relate to requests. So requests are really, different types of requests are built using catalog items. And we can think of a catalog item as a template for requests. So as you know, we call our catalog items, we give them titles that are meaningful to our end users. So in this example here, the catalog item is titled, "How can I help?" Okay, maybe that could be meaningful to our users when it's exposed on the self-service portal. But underneath the catalog item, we have an associated form, which the end user populates, and we have an associated workflow. So when an end user selects a catalog item, they are presented with that form. And when they complete that form, the associated workflow is initiated and kickstarts the request lifecycle. So for every catalog item, we have an associated form and an associated workflow. And these things are not generally constructed independently, because what gets inputted into that form, that data can then be used and worked on by the workflow later on. And we'll touch back on that further on in the session. So with the workflows that underpin our request lifecycle, it allows us to kind of function in these three ways. It will give these benefits, really. It allows us to provide what we call orchestration. We can start coordinating automated tasks and human tasks to ensure we have smooth execution across our business processes. And when we think about business processes across not just our IT service desk, about other teams, we start thinking about orchestration. We're kind of orchestrating processes that span different departments, that span different teams within IT perhaps, that can kind of bring different groups together to fulfill bigger objectives. We then start automating those manual tasks that aren't necessary. And we start giving more visibility, not just to our end users, our customers, but to who we actually who we're accountable to in our business as well. We have a bit more accountability for what's going on. We can have a bit more of an audit trail through the workflows. We're not just saying, well, we followed these steps in our paper descriptions. We think we do our best, but no, it's all built out through the workflows and a full audit trail is given. So let's actually start looking at the idea of what workflows are and what they contain. So a workflow has a few key components, or every workflow has these few core components. Workflows consist of stages. A stage defines a different phase of the workflow, and a workflow can have one stage, it can have as many stages as you like. Stages are great for breaking down your workflow into the various phases in terms of managing the workflow. If it gets quite big in the workflow designer, you can break it up into stages. If you'd like to communicate the various phases of the request lifecycle to your customers, then it's useful for doing that too. It serves two purposes, the use of stages. Workflows consist of tasks. So these are the things that happen in each of the stages. They can be automated or they can be manual. And we call manual tasks human tasks in our workflow designer tool. What we also have is the use of decision making in workflows. So not only can we define what happens at the tasks, we can define, well, actually different rules that dictate, well, this task happens based on certain conditions within the workflow. So here you can see an example of a decision node that splits out the workflow into two routes. So based on a decision and the condition of that, different things can happen. And finally, we have nodes in the workflow. These are the core components that define the different elements of the workflow. They're the building blocks. And the little boxes, the little shapes you can see, and you've seen on some of these slides, different colors, because different nodes do different things, different shapes. But ultimately, the workflow designer and our workflow tools, they act as a blank canvas. We have some out-of-the-box workflows that you can leverage. We can create workflows with you and for you through our professional services teams. But ultimately, our workflow designer tools are a blank canvas for you to build out the business processes that are going to impact your business positively. Because we know that no two organizations are the same. You may have similar workflows, similar business processes, but actually the details of that within them are going to be unique to your business. So going back to some of the notion that some of the workflow components are actually visible on the requests. In particular, the different stages of the workflow. And as I mentioned a minute ago, these are useful for exposing to your end users and your agents where a workflow is in terms of its life cycle, which stage it's in, and which milestone within the stage it's currently in. So we have the workflow tracker, the green line that goes from left to right, with the different stages at the top and the different milestones, the checkpoints underneath that are ticked off as it goes through. Likewise, when we define human tasks in a workflow, these are surfaced on the request view as well. And when we assign tasks to agents, these are accessed by the agents here on one of the panels on the request view. Doesn't matter if you can't read it so well, it just illustrates where the workflow components are actually visible on the requests. So let's actually take a look at the workflow designer tool. So bear with me one moment. I'm just going to move to a different window and share my screen. So I'm hoping I've moved across and you can now all see my screen. I'm just double checking. There's confirmation of this. Okay, excellent. So here I am in the Service Manager configuration area. And if you've not been here before, we're going to show you how to get here shortly. And I'm under the Workflows menu. And I can see a list of all the workflows I have in my instance. So quite simply, to create a new workflow, I use this plus button here. And I create a new workflow and give it any name. And the first thing I'm presented here is the workflow canvas. This is a drag and drop area where I can move around and start adding my nodes. What I have and what every workflow needs is a start node that initiates the starting point of the workflow and an end node that indicates when the workflow has finished. And you'll see that this was given to me by default when I started. Now, this workflow has one stage. So as I said, every workflow has to have a minimum of one stage. And from here on in, I can build out a workflow to be as simple or complex as I need for my business practice. So a few key things that I'm just going to introduce here today to start with is the issue of working on the canvas. First off is I can select the nodes, they are highlighted. I can delete them and do things to them by right-clicking on them. I can also select and do things to the connections between the nodes by selecting them and right-clicking on them. So to start with, I'm going to delete the connection between these two nodes because I want to add some things between them. And you'll note that now I've got some kind of warning boxes showing, and that's valid because there's nothing connecting my workflow. It's not really going to work. So in order to start adding nodes, I need to hover over a node, see these gray arrows that appear, and then I drag a line, and then when I stop, I'm given a drop-down menu to select a new type of node. Now, there are lots of different types of nodes in the Workflow Designer. We are not going to cover them all today. We're only going to cover a couple of them, the key ones that get used a lot. The first one we're going to look at is called the Hornbill Automation node. So I'm going to add a Hornbill Automation node here after my starting node, and it's connected. Now, every node needs to be configured. And I'm able to open up the configuration menu either by clicking on the cog or by double clicking on the node itself. And this opens up the panel to the side. I can remove that panel by double clicking back on the canvas, and then opening it up again through the cog or double clicking the node. So if you're opening up one of these configuration menus for the first time, don't be put off by the amount of options there are. There are a lot, but we're only interested in a few key ones. So today, I'm going to give my node a title, and this is noted in the display. This actually shows what it's called here in the Workflow Designer. It doesn't matter what I call it here. I want to give it something meaningful, so when I come back to it, I'll know what this node does. It doesn't change the functionality of the node. So here, I'm going to use this node, which is a Hornbill automation, to get the request details. Now, a Hornbill automation node is an automation that Hornbill does based on one of the applications within Hornbill. It's something that you choose from the preset automations. So here the application is Service Manager. I'm going to do something within the Service Manager application itself. The scope, I'm going to choose Entity. Now, 9 times out of 10, when you're working with any Hornbill automation nodes, you'll need to use an entity type of node. I'm not going to explain the difference between the application and the entity for now, because it's not necessary. Essentially, we want to drill down until we get to the task of what is this node actually going to do for me. So the type of entity I want is it's going to be requests, because I want to get the details of the request. That's things like who raised the request, what's the request ID, some out of the box information. So the type, the entity is going to be the request. The type is going to be get request information, and the task is going to be get the request details. And on all of these, I'm given specific options that I can choose from to get certain things. I can get the team details. I can get the answers from the intelligent capture, the form that the customer put in. So this is a really important one. But for now, I'm just going to get the request details. So all I've done so far is I've added a new node. I can actually now complete my workflow. It's not really going to do anything. It's just getting some information. I'm not acting on it in any way. It's just getting the information. So after that demo, we're going to now start our lab activities. So for our first activity, we are going to create, or you are going to create, the first stage of a simple workflow. Now, the first part of the activity, and this is probably the most important part of all of the activities you're going to do today, is you are going to log into our demo instance of Hornbill. Please don't go to your own environment. We don't want you breaking anything there. We've created a separate, safe environment where you can break stuff, play around. It's not going to affect your customer data or anything in your instance. We want you to log in and just get your bearings. We want you to be able to scroll down, see the activities. We want to make sure you can log in. So if you're struggling with that, please ask for help immediately, because that's the first hurdle to overcome. Especially if this is the first time that you've been here at Academy Live. Then we're going to get you to start creating a simple workflow for incident management. And you are going to do the assignment stage. Okay, so what I want you to do to get started is to select the lab icon on the left-hand side, which is shown here on the slide. When you scroll down through the instructions, when you see this end of activity, please return to the class. There is a stretch goal in this activity, which means that if you complete the activity in time and you get to some of the instructions that indicate it's a stretch goal, if there's time, do complete it or start having a go. If you don't have time, don't worry. Carry on. Just wait for the next activity. It's optional. It's not mandatory, and you can leave it and you can still keep going through the lab activities. Okay, so off we go. We're going to move on now. Okay, everyone, if you want to just join us back in the main session, if you select the follow presenter toggle at the top left, like I said, it doesn't matter if you haven't quite finished this. You can carry on into the next activity, and we've got some contingency time, so it's fine. So ultimately, we've really created a first stage here of our workflow, and this stage really is the assignment stage, we're going to call it. And what it does, we have two Hornbill automation nodes. And as I said, these do out-of-the-box automated tasks related to specific Hornbill applications. So we've got the first node, which has assigned it to a team. So you've assigned it to one of the teams that's already set up in our demo environment. And then we've created a email confirmation automation. So this automatically sends an email out to the customer confirming that the request has been raised, it's been received, just a kind of a courtesy email. So hopefully your workflow looks something like this. And then we're actually going to then move on to add a couple of different types of workflows. Different types of nodes for the next activity. So the first node we're going to add is a human task node. And again, you can see it here on the slide, a human task, when we have this in our workflow, it appears as an activity on the request itself for an agent to complete. So how you define the task, what it is you're actually tasking them to do, could be anything. Could be to make a phone call, could be to actually go and pay an on-site visit, could be to, well, actually, the task is to go and resolve the problem yourself. Go and do the job. Don't send the confirmation email. We've already automated that. Now actually go and do what we need you to do. So the second node that you're then going to look at is a decision node. So this allows us to automate flows within the workflow based on rules, which we call decisions. So in this next activity, you're going to create the second stage of the workflow. And in this workflow, it's going to prompt the agent to investigate the issue. And then we're going to add a decision with two outcomes. In this example workflow we've got here, the decision is going to look at, well, did the agent resolve the issue or not? If yes, do this. If not, do that. So let's get back to the lab environment. So select lab to get started, and then either finish off activity 1. You don't have to do the stretch goal. That was optional. Move on to activity 2, and we've got 10 minutes on this one. Off we go. So let's get back. If you can toggle back to the follow presenter mode. And again, don't worry if you haven't finished this. There's plenty more time where you can carry on. So if you just want to return back to the class. So now we have two stages. We're starting to build our workflow out. And I'm sure some of you, especially if you've not worked in the workflow design at all, are realizing that, there's a lot in this. It is quite fiddly. There's a lot of options. And actually, it's not just a simple case of dragging stuff that's pre-baked, which is why we're starting simple with these kind of first principles and these key types of nodes that are crucial to. So I want you to just take a step back because you've been following a lot of instructions, and just in the chat, I want you to explain in a sentence or two what the workflow does so far. Can you give me a couple of answers? What's actually going on here? What have you done? Great, our first answer's in. So Sahana says, ticket assignment to group and sending email confirmation to the customer. Yeah, then upon investigation completion, move to the next stage. In between, checking all the stage checkpoints are completed. Great. I'm assuming you may have done the stretch goal if you added some checkpoints. Brilliant. Daniel says, we've created a flow that assigns to a team, sends an email, and then creates a task to start the investigation. Excellent. We have Janet says, for this last lab, the call only moves to resolution stage after the issue is resolved. Exactly. So we have started putting some conditions in here. Does it recreate the task until it's completed? The workflow aborts if not completed. It doesn't necessarily recreate the task for what we've done here today. Now that may be a kind of a better use case if the in the real world, let's say it wasn't resolved, we wouldn't want to just abort and throw the request out the window. But just for the sake of this simple example, the request has been aborted. Again, we're only using a very basic example. This is not full ITIL, incident management process, although we hope to do some training around some decent ITIL processes in the future. But really, this is just to get us through some of the basics. So another question, just to have a think about, without looking ahead in the instructions, in a typical process like this, what kind of things are likely to happen next in a process such as this? Answers in the chat. So now you've just explained what has happened. What could happen next? Yeah, Daniel says close the incident. Exactly. If it's been resolved, well, we need to close the request. There's no point keeping it open. Yeah, resolution. Exactly, that stage. In a more complex request, we could have had some SLA timers, which is a feature of Hornbill. So as part of a service level agreement, you may have some, metrics around response and resolution that need to be met. So, if we could have had a timer in here that starts the investigation timer starts now. We need to resolve this within a certain timer. Again, we're not going too detailed on this. Chris says, an email notification to the customer seeking confirmation of resolution. Great. A loop to remind and then close if there's non-response. Exactly. So how do we manage those intricacies of a request when we ask something for a customer and we don't get a response? We don't just want to leave the request open forever, because we need to have some kind of closure within that, and the onus does have to be on the customer, and that needs to be baked into your service level agreements, your service strategy. So those designs of how the processes map out. So great. Okay, right, let's move on to the next activity, and this is a much shorter one and actually feeds into some of the things that people have just suggested. So this final stage resolves the request once the agent's marked the work as completed. So we can automate things like the request status, which is what we're going to do here, alongside other attributes, such as automating the changing of the priority, the request category based on conditions, and other details. It just provides a powerful means of administering requests without human error, without someone getting it wrong, or without the time taken to do those things. So a good example is if a request is logged in the wrong category. We're not looking at categories today, but automating the changing of category, automating the change of priority. And here we're going to automate the changing of the request status based on a condition. So let's all jump back to the labs and we'll finish off this. Oh, well spotted, Janet. It doesn't say in the instructions about setting a checkpoint, but there is one in the image. So I'll say we put that in there just to catch you out, see if anyone found it. So yeah, you can do that if you want. Okay, great. Let's all jump back to the presenter mode, and we're just going to quickly wrap up this and then move on. So just to summarize, really, we've created a nice, straightforward, hopefully working workflow. And the real aim of this was just to introduce you to creating a workflow from scratch and these three types of common nodes that get used a lot. The Hornbill automation node, the human task node, and the decision node. And these form the kind of the foundations of all the workflows, really. And once you've got your head around these and you've had some practice, you can kind of build on from that, and the other nodes start making a lot more sense. Okay. Our next activity is, well, this is really what we should be doing all the time, is to just test, to actually see if the workflows worked. Now, more often than not, what we've done here is probably not what you do in practice when you want to create a new workflow. The idea of starting small and then iterating, testing, and then adding something else to make sure it all works is a far better process. But to get you to build one stage, then test it, then one stage, then test it, would have taken us too long. So what we're actually going to get you to do is to log a request to test the incident process workflow that you've just built. Now, in a Blue Peter style, we've already here's one we've already made. We've already created a catalog item for you. We've made it available for you on the self-service portal, and we've associated a form and the workflow already to that catalog item. So you don't need to worry about configuring it. This should not take too long, but it should demonstrate whether your workflow has been successful or not. And then we'll jump back in a minute. Okay, so back to the labs for the next activity. Okay, so if you want to just toggle back to join the class again, we'll just quickly wrap up the activity you just did. So hopefully you should have been able to raise a ticket and send the result of the workflow you've just created. May not look exactly like this. Great. And yes, 2 people received the email. Anyone else received the email? The automatic one we put in. Excellent. No email for Daniel. Never mind. I think it did say in the notes, but it can take a while, especially for some organizations' mail service to kick in. So you may not get the email immediately. You may also notice some errors appearing on the request view. And that's if perhaps the workflow didn't quite go to plan. But don't worry, you may receive that email later. It would have, if you sent it to the settings in the activity, it should go to your email that you logged in or signed up for the Academy Live session with. Okay, so we have one more activity left, which has a bit of a twist to it. But before we do, I'm going to demonstrate one last thing in the Workflow Designer. So bear with me while I share my screen again. Hopefully you can see me back in the Workflow Designer tool here. I'm going to make this full screen. Now, we've created some new nodes, we've added a decision, but there's one key aspect of working with the Hornbill Workflow Designer, and it also appears in other areas of Hornbill, which is particularly worth paying attention to. So I'm going to delete the connection after this node I set up earlier, the one that automatically got the request details. And I'm going to add a decision node in, a little bit like the one that you added earlier. And for this decision, I'm going to use what's called a custom expression. The custom expression doesn't just look at what's coming into the decision. It allows us to create a customized rule for what this decision is actually going to output. So to do that, I need to make a connection here, and I'm going to configure the decision coming out of this side, my decision node. So here I've got an outcome if, well, there's no match to my decision, or the failure and success of what comes in. But here I'm going to add a custom expression. And to do that, I have to edit the expression, and I have to build a new custom expression from scratch. And this is a little bit fiddly the first few times you do this, but once you've got the hang of it, it's quite a powerful tool. Now, the only thing you really need to know about custom expressions is that you don't necessarily need to know any coding languages or have any coding experience, but it really does help to have a basic understanding of Boolean. So when I selected to create a new custom expression here, I'm given this custom expression builder. And you can see here the expression that is given is this variable is equal to a static value, and then that's the custom expression. And at the moment, the static value is blank. Now, the tool here that's quite powerful is this Sigma icon relates to the variable picker. And here I can choose what variable I want to use in my custom expression. And what it does, it looks through the nodes that I have in my workflow. So here I've got, well, the Hornbill automation workflow, the get request details one I've called, and then it looks for all the variables that are going to be contained within that are gathered by that node. I can also look at the last node outcome, but I haven't really set that to anything. So I want to go to the Hornbill automation node that I previously added. And here I can add a variable from that node, and all of these out of the box variables, any custom fields that we could be using, which are none here. We haven't set any of those. So they're customized fields that can be used within Hornbill. The one I want to pick here is, I'm going to pick one which is called is request assigned. So this is a variable that it contains data on, is the request been assigned, yes or no? It actually tells you what the values are. So here I want to know for my workflow, which is unrelated to the one you've just worked from, has the request been assigned? And I'm going to have a decision based around that. And actually for this one, it tells me what the value of the variable is. And yes, I'm going to add yes into the static value. So when I select to apply this, the workflow will follow this route if that custom expression is met. So here, the custom expression is expressed here. So if I look in the Hornbill automations to the get request details, has the request been assigned? Yes. Okay, then the workflow will flow to this node. Similarly, I can create an end process, another end node, or do something else, whatever, if, well, there's no match. If the outcome of my decision does not equal my custom expression. So custom expressions are very powerful for adding conditions and rules based on decisions. And that's something that you are going to use in the next activity. Okay, so back to our final activity. And this activity is, we call it an open challenge. We've given you enough instructions over the last 4 activities to kind of allow you to kind of let loose a bit. We're going to give you the framework for the challenge, and we want you to fill in the blanks by adding nodes, configuring nodes, and building out the workflow to do some additional things. What we actually want you to do is we want you to build the nodes to handle the requests that have been raised via an email instead of coming through the portals, and do something slightly differently based on that condition. So when you go back to the instructions, you'll see the high-level steps to do this challenge. But if you need them, you can select the next page of instructions to get the real detailed instructions if you struggle or if you kind of get stuck on one particular aspect. See how you go with the high-level steps. Give it a go. Challenge yourself. This is meant to be a bit of a challenge. But if you need them, you can skip forward to get the details. So we've got about 20 minutes on this, so we're going to move over to that. We might have a slightly less time on this due to time, but let's jump back to the labs and start work on this challenge. Right, everyone, it's great to see everyone really going for it with the challenge in the labs. Well done. Stuff. If you want to come back to the presenter mode or follow presenter, we will just kind of look back on a few things. First off, just to point out, we will have a bit of time afterwards. So if you can stick around after 12 and you want to carry on the challenge, we're going to leave the session open. You're more than welcome to carry on playing around in the instance, ask some questions, we'll be here. But just, I want us to reflect on the challenge. It doesn't matter if you didn't quite complete it or not, but first off, let's answer us in the chat. Can you describe the custom expression that you used to determine the request source? Not necessarily list it out in the exact Boolean terms, but did anyone get that far? And if so, can you describe what it was you used? While you're writing that, great question there from Daniel. Can you test the workflow before publishing it? No, in a sense, but you test it by, as we did earlier on in the last activity, by raising a request, seeing if it worked, testing the whole process end to end. What we recommend is almost having a test service with a test users, with a test catalog items, etc. Ring fencing an area for you to test before you then deploy. And you can reuse the same forms and workflows for when a live service that isn't in the test mode. We do have a great test tool for the form designer, the intelligent capture designer tool, but not for the workflows. So yeah, can anyone describe the custom expression? Using the Sigma symbol, Sahana says the source equals email from the get request details node. Excellent. Okay, yeah, that pretty much sums it up. Next question we've got. How could we find out that your changes worked? So a bit going back to Daniel's question about how do you test the workflow? How do you know that what you've just done is actually going to work? And before deploying or publishing any workflow in the real world, we need to actually test it and make sure it does work. Any answers to that? Log a test ticket. Yeah, kind of mosh, but in terms of the changes that you've just done in the open challenge, how would you know that they work? Pretty much, Janet, you're right. Send an email to raise the test. We've added the function, you've added the functionality to determine whether the request was raised via an email. You put the decision node in and with the different outcome. So the only way to find out if it's actually works is to be the end user and to test it from that end-to-end perspective. Yeah, and as Sahana says, if we send an email, it should have the subject mapped to the summary of the request and the email content in the description of the request. So it's not just determining whether it was an email or through the self-service portal, but it does something to that information. Okay, final question. How could you extend this workflow to change the priority based on the customer who raised the request? Now, I don't want you to tell me exactly what nodes and what configuration to do, but where would you start looking if you were going to do something like that? So Daniel says an urgent email could equal high. Yeah, that could be one way of looking at it. If an email is marked as urgent or has urgent in it, we could extract that perhaps. Perhaps not necessarily even from an email, from a self-service portal. Anyone else? I guess the question here is around, we will need to look for who the customer is. And if the customer could be in how would we know that we need to change it on just the customer? So the customer could be a VIP. We could have them in a specific group in Hornbill. And if a request comes in and a customer is in that group, then that could know to, well, we need to have an automation that changes the priority of the request. So yeah, could you just add the user into a custom expression? Potentially, yes. If it's that one specific user, we could use it as that value and measure it against that. Sahana says, yeah, update the priority based on the source or the concept of a VIP. So just an idea about how we could extend this. So hopefully this challenge did manage to challenge you. Like I said, you can stick around for a bit after 12 and carry on if you want and ask any questions. We'll be here on hand. The whole purpose of this session really is not to teach you the whole workflow design at all. We can certainly not do that in 2 hours. We wanted to just give you a stepping stone to kind of hold your hand into really getting confident in using it, so that you can not only come to some of our further sessions where we're going to look at more automation topics with the workflow designer, things like auto tasks, authorizations, using some of the utilities within the workflow designer to really help you drive your automations, and beyond that when we get to further sessions. But also just to take you out of your day-to-day work, like I said, look above the parapet of what you normally do and to give you some new ideas and inspiration into what you can do with Hornbill. Just to wrap up before you go, got a few takeaways just to summarize, and we've got one final short activity left. It's not in the workflow designer, don't worry. So just to wrap up, automation in Hornbill is more than just workflows, but it's beginning to digitize your processes and identifying areas to help improve efficiencies and experiences in your business. A workflow designer is a powerful tool, but it is also quite a complex and fiddly tool. And it can be as complex as you need it to be or as simple as you need it to be. It requires practice and a lot of patience. And don't forget the idea of using the forms to gather information from your users. You can use that data in workflows to then drive decision-making further down the line. We've got some recommended next steps after this session. If you haven't seen it already, almost a companion session is an Academy Live session we did earlier this year, all around building forms in the Intelligent Capture Designer. So go and check that out on the Academy. It's available to watch, and you can access the resources from that. We also have some documentation within the Service Manager Configuration Guide on the Hornbill documentation platform, which has good information about using workflows and some documentation around some of the workflow tools in that. Finally, in our final ask, we've got 2 minutes left. We really love you to do this. Please give us some feedback on this session. Tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like, tell us what you want to see more from Academy Live sessions and the Academy in general. So the link is in the chat. Please go to the link, please fill out the form, give us a rating for the session. Tell us what you want to see in the future. We really do listen to this feedback, and we tailor these sessions and the format of them and the content of the Academy based on what you want to see and what you need. Ultimately, Hornbill Academy and everything that we do is for you, and we want to make it useful and meaningful. So please take a couple of minutes now to go and fill in that form quickly, and then we'll just do a quick final wrap up.